Welcome back to Talk of the Town on 99.7, 1450 WHTC and WHTC.com.
And welcome you back to Talk of the Town for this Monday, November the 9th. Monday, second Monday of the month. We usually set aside our 10:30 segment, talk about what's going on in Lansing with what will soon be third and final term state representative, Mary Whiteford. She represents most of Allegan County in the State House. She joins us via the Zoom connection this morning. Mary, good morning. Congratulations on your election win, and thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, Gary. Good morning, everybody.
I don't want to say it was expected, but still, whenever you're running in an election, you can't really assume it until all the votes are in. And again, congratulations on your election win.
Thank you. It's really such an honor. I just came from a family that had nothing to do with politics and decided to give it a try and just bring a common sense approach to things and work hard for the people in my district. And it's really an honor.
Before we talk a little bit about election items outside of your district, how will you approach your final 2 years in the State House?
So I've made a huge pathway towards mental health access. My goal, and I put together a white paper 2 years ago to figure out we can complain over and over again. There's a mental health crisis. People are committing suicide and all those things. But what's the plan? So what I did was come up with a plan, is having one hub for anybody who needs help, support, guidance through a mental health crisis, or even just the beginnings of signs and symptoms of mental health issues, that they have one number to call. They can find local providers, or they can end up in an emergency room or crisis center. So that was signed into law in February, Michigan Crisis and Access Line. I have 2 bills up in health policy tomorrow that really pulls everything into one place. It pulls a psychiatric bed registry, so a database of every single psychiatric bed in the state, because currently even somebody over in Holland Hospital, they could potentially be waiting for days to find a psychiatric bed while the staff are calling hospital after hospital. So one of my bills tomorrow up in health policy ties that into the crisis and access line. And then another one puts opiate hotline, suicide hotline, everything in a one spot to really help people. I'm pretty excited. Contracts have been granted. It's going to start rolling out first quarter of 21. We have one company that got the database side of it, so the hub for the state. And then another company, they do these services, and they're the people who answer the phone. They're doing this in Oakland County right now, and they got that contract to be the experienced people to help guide individuals who are having difficulties in the right direction. So we're folding out right now. Now, another part of that is crisis services. People shouldn't be sitting in an emergency room for days. So I have a bill that's before the entire Senate floor right now. It's made it through the whole process to have freestanding crisis stabilization units. And these will be spread all over the state. So somebody, when they're having difficulties, they can walk right in the doors and start getting help right away. And there's also something to get children out of psychiatric hospitals. So specifically children, into more of, they call it a psychiatric residential treatment facility. I have that bill. It's before the Senate health policy right now, just to start getting kids and stop these roadblocks to getting care and getting through all of these things. So I've got all these bills. They're all live. They're advancing, and I should have them all signed into law before the end of the year. But going into next term, I want to continue. I've heard from a lot of people of challenges with our current community mental health system, and making sure that it's money follows a system right now, and it's very complicated. But what I want to make sure is that if there's somebody who has Down syndrome, who's 45 years old, that they get the services that they need, and that they have more of a decision, or the family has more of the decisions in deciding what's the best way for them to have their lifelong care. So that is really the biggest part of it. I want to continue with my work on the Health and Human Services budget, making sure that foster kids are getting the care they need. I got a grant over to Western Michigan University. They have a clinic for kids who are have faced ACEs, so adverse childhood experiences, so trauma in childhood. They take care of about 75% of all their clients right now are foster kids. So we're going to have a massive expansion of this with full wraparound services for these kids. And let's work on what we can do to help children heal so that they can become the most functional adults that they can. So a lot of things going on, and I'm really blessed to be able to continue those efforts.
395-1450 if you have a question for State Representative Mary Whiteford. And I want to stay on this look at what you are doing right now and entering your third and final term limited after 2022. I'm not of the term limit. I'm going to be honest with you. I am not a term limit person. I don't believe in it. I believe in an educated electorate is the best way to make sure that lawmakers are accountable. By putting term limits in, lawmakers in their final term can be not accountable. Sometimes for noble purposes, they are able to do things that may not be popular, but what they feel is right. Other times, not accountable, and they're not responsive to their constituents. I'm going to ask you a frank question, Mary Whiteford. How will you stay accountable even though you will not be running for re-election in 2022?
Well, I have to say that I've never been running for re-election. The entire 4.5 years that I've been serving, I've been trying to do my best, be as responsive as I can to my constituents. And so term limits and running for re-election honestly hasn't been on my plate, because I truly believe that as a faithful person, every day you do the best you can. You do as much as you can. You pray, you listen, and you work hard. So it's not going to make any difference for me in how I view my job. But I'm going to view it in the fact that, I do have 2 years. I want to finish up some of these big goals that I've had. And that's what I'm looking towards.
I had to ask you the question because political reality is such. There are those who take the high road. There are those who take the pragmatic road and use the last years of a term, be it 2 in the Senate, in the House, or 4 in the Senate, as a way to leverage for their next job after election. It doesn't seem like that's going to be in your mind at all, Mary Whiteford.
Right. Well, I've seen so many people who had 2 feet in the future and they lost today, if that makes sense. So I think it's so important. We need to have, we have to have both feet in today, and that's following my faith. And I know I answer to our Lord, I answer to my family, I answer to my constituents. At the end of the day, that's who I am. And I think that's why I've had so much support as us, getting 66% of the vote the way that I did, just being as faithful as I can for the people of my district.
395-1450, 395-1450. One more question along these lines. Sometimes, and I'm going to use the example of Joe Halfman, the former Holland state representative, after he left the state house and many of things that he wanted to put forward, mostly in prison reform, he passed the torch to other lawmakers to follow up on what he started or wanted to do. Are you in that situation where, hey, if I can't get some of the things I want to do, especially in mental health, I'll pass the torch to these lawmakers who can be able to follow through after I leave in 2022?
Yeah, so I'll be reevaluating in the next year and a half what else I would like to accomplish. But it is really important to have a good relationship with colleagues on both sides of the aisle. And that's what I'm going to do. Speaking of former Representative Hovman, one of my bills, and it is before got voted out of judiciary last week. House Bill 4700 sets up a mental health discharge plan for people in prison to make sure that people who have mental illness and are on medications have kind of a warm handoff into an environment back at home or where they're going to live with their doctor, they have their supports, and make sure that they don't end up right back in prison right away because they have nowhere else to go. So that's one of the things I've done for prison reform to help to carry on what Representative Hovman had done. But
another person that did a lot of it was former State Senator Rick Jones, who represented Allegan County for a little while in the last decade before redistricting. 395-1450, 395-1450. If you have a question for State Representative Mary Whiteford, she represents most of Allegan County in the State House and will continue to do so till the end of 2022. Need to ask you this question, Mary. It's nothing that I don't think we have to worry about so much in our particular area. Our two clerks, be it Bob Janetsky in Allegan County, Justin Roebuck in Ottawa County, for the most part, pretty upfront guys. Integrity is not a problem. However, the election integrity has become a question. It is something that many election officials say, hey, we're above board, but it's now being put into question, especially in the presidential race and John James and the U.S. Senate race in Michigan. How comfortable are you about the election integrity in the state overall? Obviously, locally, pretty good, but overall in the state, how confident are you about the election integrity?
Yeah, you bring up a good point. Justin and Bob, they've done a great job, and it always comes down to the locals. So I spent some time with my local Casco Township clerk, and I've gotten to know her, and she worked so hard to run a fair and legal election, and I give her so much credit for that. I have a friend who is in Detroit over at Cobo Hall or wherever that was, TCF.
It's TCF Bank Center now. That's
Yeah.
now the politically correct name because of
There you go.
the change culture that we're in right now. But go ahead and continue.
Yeah, so she was there and she was working in TCF, and she said it was really weird because so that's what we have to make sure that the people of Michigan feel confident in election integrity. So when she was there, she told me all these people were taking a break at about 1 o'clock, and then I think it was a Porsche and some vans came and brought all these boxes of ballots, and she just said it was just weird, surreal. So things like that are concerning. I've heard other anecdotal stories as well from individuals. I've heard that there were 10,000 military ballots that went into that area, into TCF Hall, and the ballots actually were the first set of ballots that went out to military individuals didn't have Vice President Pence on there. They had somebody else. And so they took all those ballots, 10,000, and had to look at that and then create a new ballot that would be fed through the machine. Well, there was by state law, you have to have a Republican and a Democrat available to be able to ensure the integrity of that transposing. And that didn't happen. So there's a lot of things that are concerning. And me as a citizen, everybody I know, they want it to be fair. They want it to be honest. We have legal statute that puts these things into law. And hearing stories coming out of this, and even one of our senators, his wife was there, and it's just like, something just didn't feel right. So we need to make sure that everybody has certainty. We did have a committee on Saturday. I'm not on that oversight committee that did put out some subpoena powers to get some specific information about the election. And it's not put to rest right now. I wish everybody across the state had similar strong legal, people who really care to make sure that every single vote is tallied properly and every person's vote counts. Another anecdotal story I heard was in one county that the 3 days before the election, 300 homeless people came through the doors and registered to vote and cast their ballot and put their address as a hotel. It's perfectly legal because the citizens of Michigan passed same day voter registration. So it's totally legal, but the person there, the state representative, lost by 250 votes. So then it puts into question, what's going on? Everybody has deeply held beliefs. They truly believe that, one person is better than the other, but you need to have people have a strong moral compass who aren't going to rig the system for the person that they really care about. So that's why I go back to, making sure that we're addressing mental illness and making sure that people get help when they need it. I don't know the exact things that are going on. There's almost 10 million people in our state. So let's at least make sure that we do the best we can to make sure that every state law is followed.
Good morning. You're on the line with State Representative Mary Whiteford.
Oh, good morning, Mr. Stevens. Good morning, Mary. Congratulations on your election. You did a great
Thank
job
you.
for Allegan County and for the state of Michigan, the people of Michigan. Anyways, before you were born, I read a book called The Myth of Mental Illness by Dr. Thomas Vaz in 1969. I read a book last year called Medication Madness by Dr. Peter Reagan, and they talk about these so-called psychotropic drugs, which are nothing more than neurotoxins, and they're used for chemical lobotomies. There's also a book you might want to read by Dr. Don Cobra, a Christian minister, called Food is Medicine. I recommend that for you in the legislature and for the governor. And people are being labeled mentally ill, and it stigmatizes them. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the call. 395-1450, 395-1450. Stigma. And I'm going to bring to that point the stigma of needing help. Have we gotten past that yet, or is that almost as much of a barrier as anything else right now in dealing with mental health?
I honestly think it was a lot worse 10 to 20 years ago. I think it's getting better, especially because we have so much help for kids in schools, more social services, more social support, that teachers actually, they find out if a child is having trauma at school, that they have like a little symbol, a code word, so that the teachers are a little softer on their approach and bring them aside so that they're not embarrassed in public. So I think that, and especially actually through this COVID time, the talk about mental health and reaching out and numbers to call for help, and the amount of money that's going, like again, for schools, for support for kids, I think it's getting better. I think it's harder for the older generation. I think it's really, really hard for veterans. We just had another veteran take his life just on Halloween in Allegan. And he specifically said, and I mean, it was on the front page of the Allegan paper, is that he had some suicide problems. Thinking about it, they put him into a psychiatric unit, stripped him from every contact with family and friends. And he said that wasn't right. So I took that information, I sent it straight off to our behavioral health folks who run the state psych hospitals. And there's got to be a better way to do that. So why would somebody, say a veteran, who finds out that somebody else didn't get help, why would they go get help, right? Unless we're there for them. So we need to turn this curve more. It's bending, but it's got a ways to go. And the more that we talk about it, you talk about it, the more veterans talk about it. And I told you before, I had a close family member. Her brother was a veteran, 23, took his life about 6 months ago. This is real, and we have to soften our approach to people. We have to be kind, we have to be willing and open to listen when somebody's having a difficult time. Nobody's known where to go, so we'll have our crisis and access line up and going next year. So at least you or a neighbor or a mom or a sister can say, hey, I think you need some help, and call the number and find out somebody who can help bridge that gap and do it earlier than later. So it's a start.
It's a start. If you want more and get a hold of State Representative Mary Whiteford, we'll put her link to her GOP caucus page on our webpage at WHTC.com. We put the podcast up in a little bit. And when we chat again next month, if all goes well, Mary, we'll talk about whether or not we can get some things done in lame duck before the end of the session, and maybe a look ahead to how the landscape in Lansing will be for the next 2 years, as we still have a Republican legislature, but a Democratic governor and a Democratic-led Supreme Court. But we'll talk about that next month. Mary Whiteford, thank you very much for joining us today on WHTC's Talk of the Town. Wish you and your family well, and if all goes well, let's chat again next month.
Yeah, thank you, Gary. Thank you, everybody. God bless you all.
Thank you very much. That's Mary Whiteford on 99.7 and 1450 WHTC.